Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Echeverria. I'm the founder of Living in Liberty, a nonprofit in Pittsburgh that helps women transition out of a life of sex trafficking. You're here on the Living in Liberty YouTube channel, which purpose is to help raise awareness about the issue of human trafficking and help educate people on the issue, to help people learn more about what Living in Liberty is doing, as well as other organizations, and to help people engage, whether it's engaging with Living in Liberty or another organization. Today, we're going to be learning about human trafficking education and awareness and prevention. And we have one of our staff from our awareness and prevention team, Joe Olkowski. So welcome, Joe. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
So we are going to be talking about awareness and prevention. And whenever talking about prevention, I always like to share a story about my daughter, who at the age of 18, I think, Joe, you've heard this story, was approached by a trafficker. We were traveling from Pittsburgh to West Point across the state of Pennsylvania. And we had stopped on the other side of State College at a gas station to get gas and to use the restroom. It was my husband, my daughter, and I. My daughter and I went to use the restroom. My husband stayed pumping gas. It was one of those gas stations where the restroom is on the end, on the outside. And I went in first. And while my daughter was standing outside, a man approached her. And he said, "You're so beautiful. Have you ever thought of being a model?" And he continued to chat her up and talk to her. And what young girl doesn't want to be thought of as model material? You know, this is one of the tactics they use. And so he just continued to talk to her. But as I came out, he ran off. He did not want me to see him talking to her. And I didn't see him talking to her, and my daughter didn't express any concern. So I went back to the car. She was 18. I didn't need to stay there. And so when she then came out of the restroom again, he approached her and he continued to chat her up and talk to her. And he gave her a piece of paper, handwritten with a name of a made-up modeling agency and a phone number on it. And he asked her to call him quickly. And I think it was for two reasons. One reason, because he wanted to move this process forward, engage with her to traffic her, but also because he had a burn phone, a phone that's not good for long, so it can't be tracked or traced. And so this is one of the tactics that traffickers use. But my daughter, came back to the car and told us what happened. And because I'd talked to her until, she would roll her eyes at me like, "Mom, that's not going to happen to me." This really drove home the point that it does happen to those being trafficked. It can happen to anyone. And so my brother walked in. It can happen to anybody. And so what we did out of that was I reported it to the FBI, not because I thought they would do anything in the moment, but that they would, it could paint a picture. It provided, maybe 5 other people reported similar situations. And so they could figure out something that was going on and either let other people know or maybe even identify him, but not just from my one report. So this just drives the point home of why it's so important to do prevention work and to raise awareness about the issue of trafficking. So, Joe, I know that you've been working with our team now, and just wanted to ask you about why you believe awareness and prevention is so important.
Well, that word awareness comes almost a little loaded in today's culture because we have people who want us to be aware of this issue or that issue and wearing ribbons or certain colors. And those are all perfectly fine and well. But what's unique, I think, about human trafficking awareness is that we could actually do something. And so if we see something that's out of line, like, for example, with your daughter, that was weird. that was odd. Who is this guy at, middle of the night in this gas station? uh, that gets our radar up. So this
Mhm.
awareness allows us to kind of notice things we might not have noticed before. And then that way we can prevent rather than rescue. The old expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, is so true because, especially, I'm going to talk mostly about girls because they're the primary ones that are being trafficked, but they're going to face physical, mental, social, and spiritual harm if they get caught up in trafficking. So let's prevent it. Let's look out for them as well. Because quite frankly, sex trafficking hurts.
Mhm. Yes, it's a lot. They go through a lot of trauma when
Yes.
after they've been trafficked. Having worked on the recovery side, I have seen that
Mhm.
just the amount of time and healing it takes. So
Right.
prevention is
And that
important.
prevention is important. And one thing we point out to in our awareness seminars is that it takes 7 to 14 tries before someone's permanently rescued. There's mental health issues, there's drug addictions often, and danger and threats from the traffickers. So it's hard to get someone to rescue someone out of that slavery.
Yes. Yes, it is a long, long process to recover
Mm-hmm.
from that.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that Living in Liberty tries to do is to get into the schools. So why is it so
Mm-hmm.
important to get into our schools, and what age is appropriate to get into our schools?
Well, obviously, that's where the kids are. Uh,
Mhm.
as we've talked on our team about, what's appropriate, how young should we be talking about, frankly, children are being trafficked. But with school staff, teachers, administrators, support staff, uh, we've been going to groups as young as junior high. Except there's also an elementary school that has shown interest, wanting me to come in and give the same presentation for kids, for students. It's a hard subject, and we have to be respectful of how do we talk to them about this very difficult subject. So we've been kind of just setting it at junior high or above in terms of speaking directly to students.
Mhm.
It's also helpful to talk to students because as adults we might see things, but when they're looking at their friends, when they're seeing that their friend might be getting groomed, might be
Mhm.
a 14-year-old girl is getting asked out by a 20-year-old guy and she might feel
Mhm.
flattered. Well, he very likely might be grooming her or just getting to know her in order for one day to get her locked in to sex trafficking. 91% of the victims who are trafficked is through someone they know.
Yes.
Yes, it does happen where someone could be, abducted in that quintessential white panel van on the corner. But uh, what these traffickers do is build relationships, and they're very, very patient, and they're willing to spend the time to get to know these girls in order to, at one point, suck them in.
Yeah, I heard that only 3% of cases are abductions.
Well,
People often
yeah,
have that perception of the Taken movie, that they're
right,
coming in and
right,
abducting, and
right.
it's not the case. It's like you're talking about.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah. So is it appropriate for even youth groups or other groups like that to go talk to them?
Oh, yes, yeah. But again, we've just kind of thought, gee, junior high is probably the youngest we want to talk to.
Mhm.
I would say if I was a parent, I'd want to know, and so I would even recommend to churches and schools and so forth to let parents know we're going to have this talk with your kids,
Yeah.
and so they're aware of it ahead of time because it's a hard subject. It's it's certainly more than a PG-13 rated subject.
Yes, but we do it in an age appropriate way,
Oh,
and
uh, yeah.
and
Absolutely,
And the
absolutely.
point you made about it being that peers are more likely to recognize
Mhm.
someone being trafficked than a parent. So if we can educate them, they might be able to identify something before it really goes
Yes,
wrong. So that is such,
Probably sooner than the adults.
yes, more often sooner than the adults.
Mhm.
So there was, and I like to share this case about an Ambridge middle school coach because it kind of drives the point home that it's not always the way we think it looks. It's not abduction, and it's not always removing them out of the home to traffic them. There are many cases of where the children are still living at home with their parents. They go home every
Mhm.
night, they sleep in their bed, but
Absolutely.
they're being trafficked. So there's this case here locally in the Pittsburgh area, out of Ambridge, which is one of the middle schools here. There was a middle school basketball coach who had two girls from his middle school team that he was taking down into the city of Pittsburgh, where he was hosting parties. And he would traffic these young girls to the men at the parties,
Mhm.
and then they would go back home. He would transport them. He had another man from another town north of Pittsburgh called Wexford who would transport them back and forth. But they would go home and sleep in their bed. And the way they often manipulate them is by telling them they take pictures of them in compromising situations and say they'll share them around, or they say they'll do something to a sibling. So it's good for people to know
Mhm.
that it's not just these cases of abduction, or it can be happening through people that we think are safe people that are not. This is not to
Yeah.
scare people, but just to raise awareness around the fact that it looks all different ways. Do you have anything to add to that, Joe?
Mhm.
Oh, no.
Right. Well, there's an example, isn't it, of someone that they knew was
Mhm.
trafficking them, someone in a trusted position. And working with schools and churches and so forth, every adult has to have clearances. You have to have
Mhm.
you file for clearances. I'm sure that coach had clearances if they were following the
Absolutely.
law at their school. So you just don't know. And you brought up that idea of those taking the pictures and so forth. I use the expression pressure points when I
Mhm.
do our awareness seminars, because they will find something, either some way to embarrass them, some way to threaten them, possibly get them involved in drug use. But a trafficker will find a pressure point.
Mhm.
And then another quick story. I mean, Kelly and I were doing a seminar for students, and we were talking about sexting, of kids sending pictures
Mhm.
of themselves. And we said, well, what if someone threatened to put that on the internet or show a bunch of people? And one girl said, a lot of us don't care now if people do that. And I thought, oh, first of all, I thought that's kind of sad. But the other point is, I told her, I said, he'll find some other way to pressure you.
Mhm.
If it's not that, they'll find another one. They'll threaten your family members, threaten your friends. And that's part of the grooming process, is they'll learn who's important to you. Your grandma who lives next door, your good friend. They'll start to know who the circle of people that young student is around, and use it as a pressure point.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. So I wanted to have you talk about what you do specifically for Living in Liberty, and maybe talk about some of the recent speaking opportunities that you had, just to provide examples of where we've gone and spoken and
Sure.
what we've done.
Sure. What I do is I am a pastor, and so I'm used to standing in front of people and talking and giving presentations. And I felt this was a perfect way for me to be more involved with the work of Living in Liberty. And so I've been making inquiries. I have friends and associates in schools. I've been able to go to 2 high schools so far, and that has also opened doors to hopefully some additional ones in our area. I've also spoken to several civic groups, Rotary groups specifically, and talked to them about this awareness as well. And so I tell them, we go through some of the stats and so forth about human trafficking, and getting rid of a lot of the myths, the things that Hollywood teaches about human trafficking is largely untrue. It's not this big glamorous thing. Um, and then I tell them what to look for, watching for those signs, watching for those moments where you see a child or a teen with an adult and it strikes you as kind of weird. And that's again the same feeling you had with your daughter. If you're driving home late somewhere and it's 1 in the morning and you see a young child leaving a motel room with another adult and they're probably not their parent, just you can tell by the age, that would be weird. That would be something possibly to make a phone call on. Or a student who's constantly getting pulled out of school by a relative and then is gone for 2 or 3 days after that. That's a little weird. That's a little odd. And so that's why we're talking to schools and the personnel that work there so they could say, hey, what's going on with this kid? And this one cousin or uncle keeps pulling them out, and getting them again to have that awareness raise in their minds and think that's odd, that's strange, maybe we should say something.
Mhm. Yeah, good points. So, um, I'd like to ask the question because I really like your response to this, and you've shared a little bit about this, but why are you so compelled to do this work? What made you engage in doing this work?
Let me try to give you the condensed journey because it's been over time. I'm a history buff. I love history, and I've visited some places where tragedies have happened. I've been to a couple different slave markets here in our country. I've walked on the grounds of Auschwitz, the concentration camp that's now in eastern Poland, and it is surreal. It's odd to look at what happened there. Families were being divided. People were enslaved there. And I just was thinking about these places and thought, what would I have said? What would I have done? Would I have walked away? Would I have turned away? Would I have made an excuse? And you know, it's one thing to say, well, gee, sure, I would stand up against Nazi Germany, and you know, probably lose your life at that point. But uh, I learned more about human trafficking as our church became more involved and started supporting Living in Liberty. And it just hit me like a rock one day. We still have human slavery.
Mhm.
We still have people who are being forced to do things against their will. And so the question is, well, what am I going to do about that? I am not under a threatening kind of government like, again, like I said, Nazi Germany, but there's slavery now. And there's lots of Bible passages, and as a pastor, I want to have the same heart as God. And in Isaiah 1, he's rebuking uh, the nation of Israel and for some of the things they're doing wrong. And he says, wash yourselves. This is in Isaiah 1. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds before my eyes, cease to do evil. And then he says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. And
Mhm.
so I felt I have to do something where I can help rescue or keep kids out of this kind of slavery. And
Mhm.
as a man, it's probably not appropriate for me to try to do those things on the street
Mhm.
that Living in Liberty does. But this is something that I know how to do. I know how to speak before people and make presentations. And so that's why, because I want to do something about this.
Yeah. We all have a gift we can use and we're called to
Mm-hmm.
use in some way, right? Whether it's for this work or another kind of work, we're all
Mm-hmm.
called
Absolutely.
to act. So if someone was interested in inviting a speaker, whether it be a school, a church, a business, I mean, we really will go speak to anybody that invites us, but how can they do that if they're interested in that?
Well, Living in Liberty has a very good website, livinginliberty.org. And there's a couple different links. There's one that says invite a speaker. And then a little bit down further, it says awareness.
Mhm.
And so you can click on either one of those. It'll get you to a request page on Living in Liberty. And then one of our team members could respond to that. I'm not the only one. There are other people doing these presentations.
Mhm.
I'm actually kind of north up in the Butler area. but there are also people around Pittsburgh and so forth. But boy, if someone called me even from Pittsburgh and wanted me to come down to a school, I'd be there in a heartbeat to have that opportunity.
Well, we are so thankful, Joe, that you are part of the team and that you're just a wonderful, passionate contribution, making that contribution to living in liberty. We're so thankful for that. I thank you for today.
You're
I
welcome.
thank you for joining us today to learn more about what human trafficking education is and the importance of awareness and prevention. Thank you, Joe. Everybody, have a good day. And don't forget to, if you want a speaker, go to livinginliberty.org and put in a speaker request. We'd love to come speak to you wherever you're at.